2025 was a whirlwind, and you want to know what actually mattered for your money, not just what dominated the headlines. Today, we're breaking down the events that help shape your financial life and what they mean for your plan heading into 2026. Stay tuned. You're not going to want to miss this.
Welcome in. This is Legacy Beyond Wealth. Glad to have you. We are a couple weeks into 2026, but want to take a few minutes to look back at 2025 and kind of tie that into what to expect this year. Because look, last year was crazy, right? It was full of noise. There was tariffs, inflation, tax changes, a historic shutdown to close out the year. There was no shortage of drama. Any one of those could have been the big headline for the year, but we had multiple of them. So we're not going to recap the chaos. You've already lived through it. We want to kind of walk through making sure you know what impacts your plan and what did impact your plan in 2025, and really kind of lay the framework moving forward. What are the lessons we learned so we can be more confident this year in 2026? So let's just begin with tariffs, Rob, because that was the big news. Look, it's still in the news today, but I know, 9 months ago, I guess about now, the Liberation Day was around last April. This was a huge story, right? And it had a huge impact on the market.
It is, and it's still out there playing out. I mean, the Supreme Court is going to be ruling whether this was constitutional authority that the president took on or not. But the point of the whole tariff story is simple. Policy creates noise, not strategy. I mean, the tariffs pushed prices up and created volatility, yes. And sure, we saw some rollbacks on things like coffee and beef and bananas later in the year, but it didn't translate to lower prices instantly. Inventories have cycles that are there. And I think that, the chairman of the Fed nailed it when he said that tariff-induced inflation will take a long time to become clear. And what that means for families is that you need to plan for the long term and shouldn't hinge on government announcements that are out there. Policy changes fast, but wealth takes time. It builds slow and it requires discipline.
Yeah, headlines rarely equal an immediate impact, and we saw that with these tariffs. So you got to be ready for them, whether it's tariffs or not, Rob. It's going to be one headline or another.
Yeah, exactly. Your plan has to work whether tariffs go up, down, or sideways, right?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, another one of the big storylines from 2025 was inflation. It persisted throughout the year. And, anyone you talk to, right, they felt it, whether it's walking into a grocery store and trying to pick up one or two items and it ringing up a lot more than you anticipated. It stayed elevated, longer than expected. Things have kind of cooled off a little bit, but how does this inflation affect the retirees the most?
Yeah, inflation hits fixed income retirees the hardest because their spending doesn't adjust as easily. Grocery prices were the biggest pressure point all year. But here's what most families miss. You fight inflation with planning, not panic. And this year, we're focused heavily on adjusting spending categories, reviewing withdrawal rates, strengthening cash flow planning, and keeping 1 to 2 years of expenses in a cash bucket and staying invested so long-term dollars could grow above the inflation rate. As far as 2026, I expect inflation to keep cooling, but very, very slowly. And, think gentle landing, not a sudden drop as far as inflation goes.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what we've seen in the last few years. It's getting better, but it's not that sudden return to where we were before the huge jump about 5 years ago. And I know this is why you talk so much about that intentional spending and having that planning that is flexible with what's going on.
Yeah, and if you think about it, a lot of people will say inflation was the villain, but I really believe the lack of the plan for inflation is the villain. You got to plan that there are going to be times of high inflation, and how do we make sure we deal with that through retirement? Yeah,
because to your point, even if inflation is not in the news, it's still there in the background, right? It never completely goes away.
No, I don't know if I ever remember someone buying something saying, oh, I'm sure it's going to be cheaper 6 months later or 10 years later, right? It just doesn't happen that way.
Yeah, it's funny. I've been seeing a couple of, pictures pop up on social media of the McDonald's menu back in like 2005. And it's just like night and day compared to where we are. And these things are gradual, right? You just kind of wake up one day and go, man, things have changed a lot. It's been a little more dramatic recently, but inflation's always in the background. So you want to have a plan for it. What about these high yield savings accounts? They stayed strong through the last year. I know interest rates are kind of a big talking point here in 2026 and whether or not they'll be pulling back some. I know there's a lot of pressure to lower those interest rates. So that has been a silver lining so far. But how do these high yield savings accounts fit into a retirement plan for you and your clients, Rob?
Yeah, I think if we go back to 2025, we could say, man, a lot of people would say this is the most they've seen the earning money in a high yield savings account in the last, gosh, probably 15 years that's out there. And they're perfect for things that need to be safe, stable, and liquid. It's an emergency fund account, short-term spending buckets. They're cash flow buckets for retirees. But the mistake that people make is holding too much in these high yield money market accounts. The goal is to keep enough money to feel safe, but not so much that your long term growth suffers. And it's a very delicate balancing act to make sure that we have just the right amount in the high yield savings and that we don't have too much or too little.
And that's going to vary person to person, right? I mean, there's a lot of different factors to go into how to find that balance for a person.
It is. And I think that it's one that we went over in every one of our client meetings last year, is talking about that. And do we have too much or too little there, and always making that adjustment. And the reason we do it in every meeting is just because it's important to know that's kind of our safety account. One client calls it his scorched earth account. If everything went to scorched earth, that's what he knows is still going to be there and be safe. And we got to make sure we have just the right amount there. And life's going to throw curveballs at us, and it's got to make us be flexible. And we got to make adjustments on a periodic basis.
All right. Another big takeaway from 2025, one of the headlines was the one big, beautiful bill. And like, I know this, got a lot of headlines because of the name, and especially everybody tries to say it like the president does. But this one did fly under the radar for little people, but I know for some people, but I know advisors particularly were paying close attention to this because there's a lot of tax planning that's taken place beginning this year.
Absolutely. It changed the game for multi-year tax planning. The bill extended and modified several provisions that were set to expire. And for many families, this opened the door for more attractive Roth conversion opportunities and what I would call long-term bracket planning. But the point is this: tax planning isn't an April conversation. It's like I said before, it's a multi-year strategy. And this year reminded us that tax laws shift. Your plan has to anticipate and adapt and stay intentional. And it shouldn't just be, I'm planning for just 2025. It ought to be multiple years that you're planning for and looking out. And that's where you can make the most benefit of that big, beautiful bill.
Yeah, and Axio Wealth Management does take a collaborative approach. And again, tax planning is such a good reminder of this, right? Because you're working with multiple voices to make sure you're having a collaborative conversation about a client's, best intentions.
Absolutely. I mean, that passed in July. So for the next 4 months, I remember just doing nothing but trying to get to know and collaborate with other professionals about strategies, and not just for something that as a one-time event, but that we could continually navigate and help them plan out 3, 4, 5 years that would really have a big tax benefit for them.
Are you ready to unlock the freedom to live your best life? Schedule your no-cost 60-minute discovery meeting with our team today. During this session, we'll take the time to understand your family story and financial dreams. Together, we'll craft a personalized roadmap designed to help you achieve your goals. Let's explore how we can unlock the freedom for you and your family to thrive. Just click the link in the description of today's show to get started.
All right, and then kind of the end of the year, obviously the big news, and it kind of feels like it was forever ago, Rob, because so many things changed so quickly, but the record-breaking 43-day shutdown that took place from October to November, the longest shutdown in U.S. history. Obviously, federal workers went unpaid, SNAP benefits got paused, travel was delayed. If anybody's traveling during that time, it was very disruptive overall. But what did this time period reveal about preparedness?
Yeah, I think the biggest lesson is everyone needs an emergency fund, no matter who you work for. Whether that be what you feel like is a very secure government job, or you might be an entrepreneur that has contracts with the government. And sometimes it feels like you get that contract and it's like it's a guarantee until the government shut down. And there were so many interviews during this period of time on television with not just federal employees, but also a lot of people, entrepreneurs that had government contracts that were out there. And it affected many different industries that were out there. And when we talk about emergency funds, these are not things that are just optional. They are something that are essential and have to be reinforced on a regular basis, because disruptions don't always look like a job loss. Sometimes they're political or logistical or environmental, and economically the long-term impact might be modest, but personally, for 1.4 million families, it was a crisis.
Yeah, it was. And look, these are obviously huge stories, but we're not even going to talk about the AI driven surge in equities, or the housing market starting to thaw out a little bit, or the Fed's slow motion rate cuts, which could be changing here very soon. But there was a lot of news last year, plenty of noise. And we wanted to kind of just recap it a little bit, but also talk about how we can adapt that moving forward, because there are going to be more and more headlines again this year. We've already seen it only 2 weeks in to January as well. But give us the final word here, Rob, and heading into the rest of the year, kind of what should families take into 2026?
Yeah, I think as we go into 2026, already, I mean, we're looking at this and recording it only, just barely into 2026. And there's so many things that have already happened in 2026 that are kind of jaw dropping and eye opening, like the Venezuela crisis that's out there, and the president investigating the Fed chair for a grand jury. I mean, there's so many headline driven things that are happening out there, but I think the key being having a professional that can help you navigate those and plan for these things, and be able to adjust and adapt where you need to have a plan that's flexible. I think if anything is certain in 2026, it's going to be change. And if 2025 taught us anything, there was a lot of changes that took place in 2025. And I think we're not going to see that slow down at all. And so you got to make sure that your plan is so flexible enough that you meet on a regular basis with a professional to make those adjusted needed changes and have the flexibility for it.
Yeah, you want to control what you can control, which is your plan, your savings habits, your long-term strategy, right? That's what turns a chaotic year into a confident retirement path. And that's why we talk about these things on the show, why we do this show every single week, to help you unlock that freedom to live a life of significance, right? Not just accumulation. That's all the Legacy Beyond Wealth is about. So again, hope this year is off to a good start for you, but some things to be thinking about to make sure your financial voices are all aligned and your plan is heading in the direction you want to. If you need help with that, Axio Wealth Management can do that. AxioWM.com is the website. Check them out. Schedule that discovery call with Rob. Begin talking through some of these things and just getting evaluated and making sure Rob sees your full picture and talks about their collaborative approach on how they can help you moving forward. But I don't know, Rob, I'm expecting 2026 to have as many headlines, if not more, than 2025, because, hey, it is another election year after all.
It is. Absolutely is. So a lot of stuff to talk about in 2026. That's for sure.
All right. Take care. We appreciate you watching another edition of Legacy Beyond Wealth. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Ben.